Java web service APIs here. Java web service APIs here. So as we discussed, Sun has provided total 4 APIs here. One is jaxRPC. Next one is, it's an API here. Next one is jaxm. It's an API, Java Web Service API. jaxws. It's an API. The last one is jaxos. It is also API here. So make sure that all these 4 APIs are given by the Sun Microsystem. These APIs are given by the Sun Microsystems should develop the Java Web Service or Java Web Service client here. So you should understand one point here is, if you take any one of this API, using that API you can develop both web services or web service client in Java language here. So now here why they are given these many APIs here? Why they are given these many APIs here? Again, we have some different requirements we have here. So now here, actually using these 4 APIs, we can develop 2 kinds of web services here. One is synchronous web services and the second one is the asynchronous web services here. So to develop the asynchronous web services, we will use jaxm API. To develop synchronous web services, we will use jaxRPC or jaxws or jaxos here. So what is asynchronous web service and what is synchronous web services? Here is, if we develop web service, one web service, let us say this is one web service here. So whenever client makes a request to this web service, let us say some client has make a request to this web service. If web service takes some time to provide response back to this client, that is called as a asynchronous web services here. So meaning what? When our client makes a request, if it is asynchronous web services, client will never wait for the response from this web services here. That is called as a asynchronous web services here. And what is synchronous web services here is, when our client makes a request to the web service, if web service provides immediate response to the client, that is called as a synchronous web services here. So here we can develop 2 types of web services. One is asynchronous web services and the second one is the synchronous web services here. To develop asynchronous web services, we will use the jaxm API. jaxm full form is Java API for XML, M for messaging here. So using jaxm, we will develop the asynchronous web services here. And using remaining APIs like jaxRPC, jaxws and jaxrs, we will develop the synchronous web services here. Fine. Again, this synchronous web services has divided into 2 types here. One is SOAP based web services and the next one is the restful web services here. To develop SOAP based web services, we will use jaxRPC and jaxws here. To develop the SOAP based web services, we will use the jaxRPC and jaxws here. And to develop the restful web services, we will use the jaxrs here. I hope clear about this APIs here. So now using jaxRPC, jaxws, we can develop SOAP based web services. Using jaxrs, we can develop the restful web services here. Using jaxm, we can develop the asynchronous web services here. Fine. So now here, using this, sometimes we will discuss in the next videos what is SOAP web services, SOAP based web services, and what is restful web services, what is the difference between the SOAP based and restful web services, we will discuss later here. So now here, using these APIs, as we discussed here, is we can develop web services as well as the web service client in Java language here. Okay. So unfortunately, all these APIs are the specifications. Specification means what? It's an API. It contains only interfaces and abstract classes here. They are not providing any implementation classes here. Meaning what? These APIs contains only interface and abstract classes here. Using interface and abstract classes, we cannot do anything here. So definitely we should require some implementations here. We should require some implementation. We will use that implementation in our web service or web service client here. So assuming here, what now we will discuss what are the implementations we have for the JAX RPC, what are the implementations we have for the jaxm, what are the implementations we have for the jaxws, and what are the implementations we have for the jaxrs, we will discuss here now here. So now whatever the API has given by this we know that these APIs are given by the Sun Micro system here. This API, this specification has given by the Sun Micro system along with the JDK 1.4. This API has given by the Sun Micro system along with the JDK 1.4. Meaning what? If you are working with APIs, not required to separately download any software or any jar files here, because these APIs came along with the JDK itself here. So this jaxws came along with the JDK 1.5. This jaxrs API came along with the JDK 1.26 here. So now I want to develop one web services using JAX RPC. You cannot directly use this JAX RPC API in your application to expose your services to the client, because it's a specification here. Not only this API, you cannot use any API directly in your service side or client side to develop the web service or web service clients, because these are the specifications here. So now here, instead of using these specifications, we will use the implementations here. So now we will discuss what are the implementations we have for the JAX RPC, what are the implementations we have for the jaxm, and what are the implementation we have for the jaxws, and what are the implementation for the jaxrs, we will discuss now here. So now, so first one is JAX RPC implementation here. So as we discussed, what is JAX RPC here? JAX RPC is full form is Java API for XML remote procedure call here. So now here, as we know that it's a specification, it is a specification given by Sun along with JDK 1.4 here. So next point I want to tell you about this JAX RPC. Using this JAX RPC API, we can develop both web service, SOAP-based web service and SOAP-based web service client using Java language here. So using this API, we can develop both SOAP-based web services or SOAP-based web service clients. SOAP-based web service clients here. SOAP-based web service clients here. So now, so as we discussed, this is an specification here. So using this specification, you cannot directly develop the web service or web service client. So to develop the web service or web service client using JAX RPC specification, we need the corresponding implementation here. So what are the implementations we have for the JAX RPC here? I will explain here. So now the first implementation for JAX RPC is JAX RPC SI. SI full form is Sun implementation. SI full form is Sun implementation. The full form for this Java API for XML remote procedure call Sun implementation here. This is the implementation name. This is the implementation name for the JAX RPC, which is given by the Sun microsystem here. Which is given by the Sun microsystem here. So the implementation means what? Definitely they should provide some implementation classes for this specification or not. That is called, again we can say that they are providing some set of classes. That set of classes again we can call as an API here. So this API they are not given again along with the JDK here. Again we need to separately download this API here if you want to develop the web service or web service client using Java using this specification here. Fine. So now you should understand one point here is this implementation as given by the Sun microsystem but not along with the JDK. We need to separately download this software here. And the next one is Access1. Access1 is also JAX RPC implementation. This is given by the Apache Foundation. This is given by the Apache Foundation here. So we know that Apache Foundation means what? It's a third party vendor. Obviously they will give this API the separate jar files. Meaning what? We need to download the Access1 software separately here to create web service or web service client using JAX RPC specification here. So the next one is WebLogic implementation. WebLogic has provided one implementation. We know that WebLogic has given by the BEA previously. Now it is Oracle. So this WebLogic implementation, WebLogic has provided one implementation for the JAX RPC. This implementation came along with the WebLogic server itself here. Not required to separately download this jar files here. So the next one is WebSphere implementation. WebSphere implementation, it is given by the IBM here. It is given by the IBM. Same way, JBoss has given implementation here. JBoss is also has given implementation here. JBoss has given by the Red Hat here. So these are the implementations for the JAX RPC. So if you want to develop JAX RPC web service or web service client using Java language, you can choose any one of this implementation here. That implementation provider, so all these implementation provider should be provide WSDL generation tool, Same way they should provide skeleton. They should provide the skeleton if we develop the web services here. So let us assuming here I want to develop web services using JAX RPC Access1 implementation. JAX RPC Access1 implementation. So as we discussed earlier, web service architecture, to develop the web services we require two classes here is, one is WSDL generation tool and the next one is the skeleton here. So Access1 should provide these two classes here. No, I don't want to use the Access1 implementation. I want to use the JAX RPC implementation. JAX RPC should provide these two classes here. Same way, if you develop the client application, if we develop the client application, in the client side we require the stub generation tool here. So meaning what? All these APIs should provide this stub generation tool here. So if you are working with Access1, Access1 should provide this stub generation tool. Or if you are working with JAX RPC SI, JAX RPC SI should provide that stub generation tool. Same way WebLogic and WebSphere and JBoss implementation here. So finally what I am trying to say is, maybe sometimes you are acting as a client, sometimes you are acting as a web service provider here. If you are developing the web services using Java language, so we need to use any one of this implementation. That implementation providers should have the responsibility, should provide this visual generation tool and the skeleton here. No, I'm not a web service provider. I'm acting as a client. Somebody has developed the web services. I want to invoke that web services here. I want to write this client application using Java language here. So again, you need to use any one of this implementation at the client side. Maybe Access1, maybe JAX RPCSI, maybe WebLogic, maybe WebSphere, maybe JBoss here. So now any one of this implementation we will use at the client side. So that implementation provider should provide this stub here. So I hope clear the implementations for the JAX RPC here. The next web service API, Java web service API called jaxws. jaxws. So the next one is jaxws API here. For jaxws, we have a lot of implementations we have here is. One is jaxws RI full form is reference implementation. Reference implementation means what? It's not fully implementation. This is given by the Sun Microsystem. This is given by the Sun Microsystem here. And the same way, we have another implementation, Metro. Metro is also given by the Sun Microsystem here. Now definitely you have one doubt in your mind. Sir, why Sun has given two implementations here? Why Sun has given two implementations here? So now the first one is reference implementation. It's not fully implementation from the Sun Microsystem. What is the fully implementation from the Sun Microsystem is the Metro implementation here. So initially jaxws RI implementation, they are given in the separate jar files here. Meaning what? If you want to create SOAP-based web service or web service client using jaxws RI implementation, you need to separately download this jar files here. But from JDK 1.6, they are included this jar files, this API along with the JDK 1.6 here. So meaning what? You can direct this API, this implementation is available in the JDK 1.6, or this implementation you can also download the separately from the Java website here. And the next one is the Metro. Metro is not came along with the JDK here. We need to separately download this jars if we are working with Metro implementation to create web service or web service client here. And the next one is, next implementation name is Access2, given by the Apache Foundation. Given by the Apache Foundation here. So the next implementation is Apache CXF here. Apache CXF. It is also from Apache Foundation here. Apache Foundation here. So again we have one doubt in our mind. So why Apache Foundation has given two implementation for the jaxws specification here is, here Apache CXF can easily integrate with the Spring. Access2 is not supports the Spring integration here. Apache CXF will support the Spring integration. Access2 will not support the Spring integration here. Meaning what? I am developing one web service class. Maybe this web service needs some other objects. So what I want is, I want to inject that objects using Spring IOC here. So here, if I am developing this web services using Apache CXF, so that we can use the Spring IOC, meaning what? Apache CXF will support the Spring integration, so that we can use the Spring IOC to inject this dependent objects into this web service class here, web service object here. So the next one is, if you want to provide support Spring integration for your web services, then we will go for the Apache CXF here. So the next one is, next implementation is, same way WebLogic has provided one implementation that is called a WebLogic implementation here. This is given by the BEA here. This implementation, they are not separately given these jar files here. This implementation, we will get this implementation along with the WebLogic server itself here. So the next one is WebSphere implementation. It's from IBM. This implementation came along with the WebSphere server only here. Next one is JBoss here. JBoss implementation given by the Red Hat. This implementation came along with the JBoss server only here. And the last implementation is Glassfish implementation. This implementation has given by the Sun Microsystem here. In fact, Glassfish doesn't contain the separate implementation. Glassfish internally contains the Metro implementation, which is given by the Sun Microsystem. So this server is also given by the Sun Microsystem here, we can say that, and this Metro implementation is also given by the Sun Microsystem. So this Glassfish internally uses this Metro implementation here. And the last specification is jaxo RS here. So now here, using these implementations, we can develop both web service client, SOAP based web service client, or SOAP based web service here. So all these implementations should provide visual generation tool to develop the web service, and they should provide the skeleton also here. They should provide the skeleton to develop the web service here. If you are using any one of this implementation to develop the web service client, these implementation should provide the stub generation tool here. Stub generation tools here. So all the implementation should provide these classes here. Okay. And the next implementation is jaxo. Next specification is jaxRS API here. jaxRS API here. jaxRS API here. So the jaxRS full form is Java API for XML. RS full form is RESTful services here. So now here, using this, we can develop the RESTful web services here. This API is also came along with the JDK 1.6 here. As we know that this is a specification, so that we cannot develop the web service or web service client using this specification. We need the implementations here. What are the implementations we have for the JAX RPC API here? One is first one is Jersey implementation given by the Sun Microsystem. Next one is, so this implementation has given by the Sun Microsystem. It's not part of the JDK. We need to separately download this implementation if you are creating the web service or web service client using this Jersey implementation here. And the next one is REST Easy implementation. This is given by the Red Hat. Next one is RESTlet, which is given by one developer called Jeremy Lowell. It's one developer here. Next one is Apache CXF, which is given by the Apache Foundation here. Make sure that the same implementation name we have for the JAXWS, and the same implementation we have for the JAXRS here. JAXWS is to develop the SOAP based web services. JAXRS is to develop the RESTful web services here. So using CXF implementation, we can develop SOAP based web service client, RESTful web service and web service client here. And here also Apache CXF supports the Spring integration here. Okay. And the next one is Apache Wink. This is also from Apache Foundation. And now here if this is also Apache Foundation here, then what is the difference between the Apache CXF and Apache Wing is, Apache CXF is supports the Spring integration, Apache Wing will not support the Spring integration here. So if you download Apache CXF inbuilt having the Spring jobs here, because it supports a Spring integration here. So these are the implementations for the JAXO RS here. So we can use any one of this implementation to develop the web service or RESTful web service or RESTful web service client here. And now here coming to the jaxm, we know that using this API we can develop the asynchronous web services here. Normally we will never develop the asynchronous web services here. Still, if you want to develop the asynchronous services using Java, instead of using this jaxm, we will go for the JMS here, Java messaging services here. So using JMS also we can develop the asynchronous services here, so that we will never go for the jaxm here. If you want to develop the asynchronous services, we will go for the Java messaging service API here. That's all about Java web service APIs here. So in the next video we will discuss how to develop the web service client and web service client using JAX RPC Access 1 implementation in Eclipse here. Thank you.